Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome to another Webinar Wednesday hosted by the CSU Bakersfield Small Business Development Center. Managing your small business beyond the pandemic. Webinar number 111. So the last 111 weeks we've been here doing this webinar series. It's probably number 225 since we started doing webinars back in 2013. So good afternoon again. I'm Kelly Bearden. I'm the director of the CSUB SBDC and got a great program today on a very important topic of cybersecurity. We're going to get to that, but first let's run through a few of the other things that are going on. And today is April the 27th, 2022. So as mentioned, we have a cybersecurity expert who is coming on today to detail the threat that's facing small businesses as cyber theft moves down the food chain to affect smaller and smaller businesses. But we'll hear a great presentation on what we can do to help alleviate some of those threats. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the changes that have happened with the Kern Micro Grant Program and give you a quick update on that. Our small business credit initiative, the state small business credit initiative coming out of the US Treasury. And we'll have a little bit of an update on that. The California Dream Fund is still receiving reservations for the program. Talk about that. Running out of time on IDLES. So the economic injury disaster loan for increases and reconsideration is still open, but time is running late. As always, we'll update our open pandemic relief programs, many that we just talked about. And as always, your questions can go in the Q&A box and take your questions and answers after the presentation today. But we'll start with a little bit of a poll here, first of all. Let's break the ice a little bit today with a poll about cybersecurity. So I'm going to ask you a question, give you 3 answers, and ask you what is not true. So which of the following 3 statements are not true? 1, the FBI came out and warned farmers and ag groups of potential attacks. Crypto coin theft recently of about 540 million, or the LA Dodgers get shut out of their own Bitcoin account. One of those is not true. Is it the FBI did not warn farmers and ag groups of potential attacks? Is crypto coin theft a reasonable 540 million recently crypto coin theft? Or is it the LA Dodgers get shut out, baseball pun intended, of their own Bitcoin account? So we have about 61% of you already participating. Thanks for jumping in. And we just have a simple, which of the 3 statements is not true? Farmers and ag groups have warned of potential attacks, you know, that maybe that electric tractor, who knows? The crypto coin theft recently of about $500 million, or the LA Dodgers getting shut out of their own Bitcoin account. So we have 72% of you. We're going to move to close the poll and we'll share the results with you. And with 69% of you, we actually went down. We'll share the results here. And 56% of you say the LA Dodgers getting shut out of their own Bitcoin account is not true. And you are correct. That is not the correct one. But there has been a recent crypto coin theft of about $500 million, dropped the coin value from about 90%. And then also the FBI has been warning farmers and agricultural groups of a potential attack on planting and harvest seasons to affect grain markets. And overall, they're suspecting Russian groups that are going to try to do that. So thank you for participating. Kind of sets us up for what is to come. And we will stop the share, stop the poll, and go back to sharing the screen and go back to So kind of a status and action of some of our key relief programs that are out there. We did mention the Kern County Micro Grant Program is open. There is a time, there have been changes that have rolled downhill from the Office of the Small Business Advocate, and we'll talk about that a little bit and look at the new application form quickly. The Mono County Grant and Forgivable Loan Program is open. You're going to want to see one of the Jeffs there, either Jeff Simpson or Jeff Lucas, the contractor that they work with, for more information on the Mono County program. Also, we had mentioned that the EIDL remains open for increases and reconsiderations. The Employee Retention Credit, also called the Employee Retention Tax Credit, remains open retroactively for periods in 2020, the fourth quarter, and the first 3 quarters of 2021 through an amended filing process. And remember that Employee Retention Credit can be used still to get a refundable, immediately refundable tax credit, or you can offset income in future years. So that is open. We're asking you, of course, if you want to learn more and participate in the California Dream Fund, send an email to our lead regional office at CASBDC. Sure, that's California Small Business Development Program, and kind of an acronym, CASBDC at ucmerced.edu. And they will assist you and get you working toward that particular goal of going through the training, the consulting, and potentially getting $5,000 or $10,000 from the California Dream Fund to start your own business. The City of Bakersfield Restart Loan to Grant program is now closed. So you're going to want to see Access Plus Capital if you have something ongoing with that. And we did mention the State Small Business Credit Initiative. We're going to get into this a lot next week. There are new developments out on this particular program that apparently is shrinking from about $10 billion to $8 billion nationwide. And many of the programs are still going to go forward. It's just they're going to be going forward with smaller amounts. For those of you that applied for the California Relief Grant Program, probably most of you received either $5,000, $15,000, or $25,000. And you did that through lendistry.com. And while the program actually ended last September, they are still funding loans. So if you even were in the process of doing an application, you might have received an email recently from Lendistry giving you the opportunity to go back in and still kind of, correct that information and to get that money. So they're still funding that particular program, even though it has been about 7 months since they closed it. A few of you still working on PPP Forgiveness. It was due 10 months from the end of your covered period. And restaurant revitalization funding has a definite maybe again. This program and at least the option of future funding coming just won't go away. So we'll see and keep our eyes on that to see. We did have a $44 billion bill that passed the House. It was not bipartisan, so probably faces longer odds in the Senate, but it was to go back and to fund a lot of the restaurants that applied for the restaurant funding that were shut out, as only about 30% of them, 30% of the restaurants did get funded. Okay, we mentioned a little bit the Kern County Small Business Micro Grant Program. And a couple of things have changed on that. And of course, intent is to provide $2,500 for the smallest, neediest, and most vulnerable micro enterprise businesses that did not receive that California Pandemic Relief Grant from lendistry.com. So on that particular program, they have amended what was actually the definition of a qualified micro business. And it must be proven or attested that the business was significantly impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, something I still like to call now the COVID-22 pandemics. But all you have to do is evidence that 10% reduction occurred from 19 to 20, and that is by providing a tax return and or a signed attestation and narrative describing significantly the impact from COVID-19. So those are the two things that have changed and changed recently. As we one thing we have learned about pandemic relief programs is the rules of the games do change while the game is being played. And that has happened with many programs, and it's happening with this one. It has delayed funding for that program, as the first checks, I do not believe, have rolled out yet. So there might be more to your application if you have applied for that. So what we like to say is stay tuned. Those reasons where we see small businesses have been declined, it's because you received the grant from lendistry.com. Your sales exceeded $50,000 in 2019. It's not your net income. So it's based on your gross sales, your revenue, your sales. And if that exceeded 50,000, we're seeing that as a decline, a major decline cause, as bigger businesses then that meet the definition of micro have been applying. Also, if it's not your major income source, so if you had a job and worked full time and did the micro business on the side, not going to probably fly through the county of Kern. And there are other eligibility issues that have happened as well. So this is a kind of an obsolete flyer that we've shown you in the past. It's from the California Office of the Treasurer. And the Treasurer Office, well, the Treasury had this out for 1.1 billion. It looks like now with the recent changes, it's going to get reduced to about $900 million in California. But a lot of programs that are coming out and a lot of ways to provide assistance to small businesses that need some form of small business loan. So the money, the $2 billion, was part of other money that went for COVID-22 relief. And that actually is called COVID 2022, which is money that Congress has moved from various small business programs and have actually what they call repurposed these particular funds. And the repurposed funds came from a number of SBA programs. The Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, which had a couple of billion left. They took a few billion from the Economic Injury Disaster Loans, and then a couple of other programs, Higher Education Relief Fund and Transportation Aviation, in order to get the $10 billion to work on more vaccines moving forward and to work through this particular threat. Mentioned the California Dream Fund a little earlier. Again, there's your email address if you want to participate in that program. And remember that going through the training, the business plan and development, and the consulting does not guarantee funding. So there are grants of $5,000 to $10,000, but once you get into that program, you can learn more information. We talked about a little of the COVID economic injury disaster loan program. There have been a lot of changes in 2020 on an upcoming webinar when we do our deeper dive with no guests, no other topic. We'll get into some of the changes that are happening and how those changes affect individuals, but still not too late to get a reconsideration request. If you were potentially denied, you can still get the reconsideration request in. You're going to want to kind of figure out and find out from SBA why it was declined, and then address within 6 months of that decline what has changed materially in your particular business or your application, and submit other paperwork as well. Okay, great topic today, cybersecurity. I just cannot talk enough about how important this topic is becoming and remains important. And we have a great guest with us today to go over this particular topic. Bill Britton, he became the Cal Poly Vice President for Information Technology and their Chief Information Officer in January of 2016. He's the director of the California Cybersecurity Institute, co-founder of the Digital Transformation Hub, and the Paso Airport Commissioner. Very ambitious projects since he's been there, including a cloud-based campus data center, which was instrumental in ensuring Cal Poly could swiftly scale to virtual learning, what they got to do in 2020. In 2021, he was the recipient of the Tim Bellini Technology CIA Award. 30 years of experience in IT, leadership, cybersecurity, space, and defense. Huge defense aspect of it. Defense is so important in cybersecurity, government contracting, all those particular things, was first introduced to cybersecurity during a 20-year career as an intelligence officer, electronic warfare officer, and director of the Mission Planning Institute in the U.S. Air Force. Master's certificate in program management from Villanova University, master's degree in strategic intelligence from the Joint Military Intelligence College, and a master's degree in history from California State University, Stanislaus. Let me introduce and bring in Bill Britton. Bill, great to have you. Look forward to the presentation, and thank you so much for joining us today.
It is my pleasure to be here today. I want to thank the CSU Bakersfield SBDC, Kelly and Maureen, for inviting me here today. Awesome. I appreciate it. I've got some slides for you here so that this hopefully is not just another boring conversation about cybersecurity, but let's change it up a little bit and really kind of get knowledgeable and active in understanding what is, to a lot of people, a very difficult conversation. They think you have to be a engineering type to understand cybersecurity. People think that you have to have a degree in engineering and be able to, chase the green worm around the computer. I'm here to tell you it's not that bad. And I think there's other ways to look at this. So the first thing is let's look at how big is this problem set and what are we really looking at? So if you look at this great chart for understanding all the different areas and challenges, healthcare, farming is indicated, data breaches, information breaches. And, there's so many different laws. You got to ask a question. Why aren't we catching all this? Why is it? Well, a lot of different organizations have to be involved to really chase all these different bad agents and actors. And we're not really equipped as a nation to go after them. So a lot of this really evolves to you, the individual, to defend and protect yourself. Now, that's when you're starting to say, okay, wait a minute, you just told me I didn't have to be a cyber expert and I don't have to be an engineer. We're going to try to simplify some of that. I'm going to give you 8 different rules that you can follow to help you protect yourself, your small business, your home, your family, all those sorts of things. So with fear off the table on these large numbers, let's really go to the next element, which is how do you protect yourself? So the first thing I want you to start doing, I want you to change your mindset on cybersecurity. Instead of using cybersecurity, I want you to supplement the word cybersecurity with consumer. So I want you to think, be a consumer of the internet. So when we started learning about being a consumer in the world, right? And this is a life lesson that we learn about being a consumer. How many of you turn the lights off at night because you don't want to pay for power all night long because it's dark? You don't want it. That's being a consumer. How many of you have locks on your doors in your house? Well, that's kind of being a protection consumer. You're protecting the goods inside your house and you lock them and you use them because you don't want people to come in because your house has information, has maybe money, has personal effects that you feel are important to you. So as a consumer, you're practicing principles in your life performance that you think are important to protect you, your wallet, your family, your income, and other things. And so now what we want to do is we really want to make using the computer like being a consumer. So as I said, one of the major consumption elements of being a consumer is you put locks on your doors and your windows, and you do that to keep people out. Well, that's the same reason you have a password for your computer, for different apps and everything else. It is your privacy element. It's the protection of you keeping people out because of your password. So if you make your password simple, it's easy to predict and get into. So let's go a little further with that. Let's say you have a house key, right? And you have 10 copies made and you lose 5 and you just don't know where they are. Do you take the risk of saying, well, that's okay, I've got 5 more, so I won't change my locks? I don't think that's the case. Most people will say, okay, time to change the locks because I've lost so many keys. Anybody finds it, they can come into the house. And that's also because there's some kind of identification, or if it's on a keychain that says my house and your address, there's a high probability you will change it. So using that password, not reusing them, like reusing a key to your house, that's really critical for personalizing your consumer approach to your data. So the next thing we want to talk about is okay, I've heard this story about passwords, Bill, and everybody tells me, okay, they can get past a password in 11.5 seconds using a supercomputer, which is actually a true statement. So the key becomes, what if they do get through the password? Or what if I'm clumsy with it and I use a password that's password? What's the next thing I can do that can best protect me and the situation that I'm in? It's using this thing called multi-factor authentication, or MFA. Multi-factor authentication is the ability to use a second step after you enter your password. Might be doing for your bank account, you might have it on certain applications. Many personnel systems for businesses have that MFA, multi-factor authentication, as the second step. That's because if somebody does figure out your password, say you had a phishing attack, they got your password information. Because of that MFA, there still is a second step that has to use you to personally identify entry into that account. So there's different tools, different names for this. Google has it on their Google site that they have a built-in multi-factor. There's a program called Duo. It's an application. You put it on your phone. You can just, when you enter your password, it says going to next step, and suddenly your phone is buzzing you and saying, did you authorize entry to this account? Multi-factor is the major blocker and stopper of phishing attacks when they're successful, because it takes a second line of entry. And if you say, I didn't do that, whoever stole your password will not get into your account. So two things, consumerism wise, again, your choice, what you can do to protect yourself. The next two, they get a little technical, but not overly so. Okay, the first one is really using a VPN, or virtual private network. So think of it in this way. When you use a virtual private network on your computer and you're talking to, say, a server or a computer at work, and you're in a small business, and so you're stuck at home, you're virtual, and you've got to log into the system at work. The VPN creates a tunnel, and it's just like a tunnel in a mountain. So when I go in that tunnel, I guarantee I'm coming out the other end. And oh, by the way, I'm the only one going in. So they would have to hack into the VPN system to get into the same tunnel that you're in to get into your computer at work. So it creates a protection zone around you using your computer at work. Again, there's several different types of VPN. The one I use is Nord, not difficult at all. It's an annual service. And oh, by the way, they have an MFA attached to it as well if you want to get that as well. So there's differing systems. The best kind of VPN also lets you choose where, that is, what region you're logging in from. So even if you make a trip to Mexico on vacation, your VPN can log you into a US server to get into your system at work. So you may have a geo blocker on your system at work that says anything from out of the US cannot enter in. Your VPN will actually allow you to log in via a US IP into your network. So it's very functional support-wise for you. Again, many choices on what kind they are, but if you think about it again, it's really being a consumer. You're protecting your connection. You're protecting your home computer to your work computer so that they can talk to each other without no one listening in, monitoring, or dealing with you. And using the VPN also then hides the originating IP, that is the IP associated with where you're doing business from, and it starts to act like it's the IP associated with the VPN service. So it's very supportive in defending you and your IP and your identity from where you're at. So the next one I know you've heard a ton about, phishing attacks. And again, this is kind of an interesting conversation. As we have grown up with computers, we have learned to be very accepting of everything that comes to us via the internet on a computer, which is absolutely kind of crazy if you think about it. So let's go back to when the phones first came out, or you're using phones and had that dial thing on it that you had to do. When the phone rang, we were all trained, run, go get it, so the person on the other end doesn't get cut off. So we were literally trained from small age to answer the phone and say, hello, who is it? You'd also identify yourself if you were taught with the manners. Hi, this is Bill. Who is it? And so you've got this as a learned process in your head. But as a consumer, that's not very smart. And as time went on, what we saw was people calling you to gain information to sell you something. And once they got your name, they'd look you up, and they'd start finding information on you, and it's that sort of thing. Now, flash forward, we've got telephones that have caller ID on it. And if we don't recognize the name, we don't answer it. It goes to voicemail, we go to the voicemail and read it, or just forget about it. So we've kind of evolved a little bit, but in the computer sense, email-wise, we haven't really evolved. We still read almost every email that comes into us. It's really kind of crazy. It's the old answer the phone because it's ringing syndrome. So the key on email and phishing attacks is really simple. Just like when you first start answering the phone and you got digital ID, if you don't know who it is, don't read the email, delete it. If they really want to talk to you, guess what? They'll pick up the phone and call you. It's amazing. And then if you don't want to talk to them, that's your choice, and because you know who it is. But again, don't be so open with going to email. The second part is, if it starts asking you for personalized information, anything to do with your house, your phone number, an account of any kind of account, don't click it. Don't give it information. Again, if somebody really wants that from you, you can always return the email and say, I'm sorry, I don't do this. I'll talk to you when I come to visit you, or I'll provide you this information in person, or really kind of get defensive in nature with them asking information on the email. Hotlinks. I just recently, we had an experience with this at the university where people were getting emails that said, your AWS purchase you just tried to achieve was blocked. Please fill in the information below for our security team, and we'll help you with that purchase. Well, what's interesting, it gives you a hot link to what they say is an Amazon hot link, and it's not. First of all, Amazon doesn't block your transaction. It will tell you during the transaction that something went wrong, not in an email afterwards. Secondly, always check the email. Sometimes what I will do is I will hit respond and look at the email, and it's not Amazon in the subject area where it's going to return to. So you can look at that. There's a whole bunch of different ways to do this. The simplest one is just don't read it, delete it, because it doesn't make sense. We have to use a lot more logic, common sense, consumerism when we start dealing with phishing attacks, emails, and how they deal with you. Syntax and spelling, that's the number one thing. If the email that you're reading is grammatically garbage, there's a high likelihood it is garbage. Delete it. It's from a bad actor. Get rid of it. And so again, those are simple ways to look at it. Again, you don't have to be a technology person. You don't have to be heavy duty cyber to do all these first four things that we've talked about. They're really about being a good consumer and how to deal with things as a consumer. So 5 and 6, this one's a little bit trickier, but sometimes it works. And I've actually done this and gotten some great information. So the subject line of the email you're looking at, copy that, copy, paste, and just paste it into a search file in a search engine. Just, go to Google, paste that in. And believe it or not, if someone has been attacked with that same perspective before, you actually can find that warning as a Google search. In other words, so it may say your AWS purchase was blocked. Copy that, put it in as a subject search that, and you will find that other people are reporting the same problem and telling you and telling anybody who wants to read that it's a bogus email, don't respond to it. And in many cases, they'll tell you who to report it to, because trying to find out who to report these things to is a nightmare. And that's really you being proactive on your own part to warn the company, but normally they're not concerned about it. They're only concerned if they have a loss of finance or a loss of data. So most of the time they don't respond to that, but now you can be proactive in finding it out. So I had a situation where my own account, I logged into a network in a hotel in Vegas. The the network, my VPN was knocked offline. Not sure how, but it was knocked offline. And the minute it was knocked offline, somebody in India got my access for my Netflix account and started logging on multiple accounts. Netflix sends me a notice instantaneously that I'm getting logons from India. I go and I pasted the notice directly into the search on a Google search and was able to recreate, find out who to attack my system, what to do about it, and how to handle it instantaneously. I mean, I didn't have to be an expert, although I guess I am, but I didn't have to be because everything I needed to do was right there online. So that was one of the areas where, again, being a consumer, researching your own problem set, finding that was really advantageous. Number 6 here is kind of an interesting one. So a lot of us like to shop online, and we kind of use the credit card that's our debit card or, whatever is online. I don't do that. What I do is I use one card that has a very strong security program associated with it. In other words, if there is a charge on the account that doesn't look normal, they call me. They say, Mr. Britton, this charge was made on here. We've never seen you buy that kind of activity before. Is this you? And I say, no, it's not. And they immediately pull it off. The other reason I say use one with a strong security and only one card when online is if you have a card and you're using multiple cards to make multiple purchases online, and you're using multiple, and you find out there's been a hack of one of your accounts and you don't know which one, you literally have to cancel all the cards that you use to purchase online. If you use one account card with a strong security backing, it becomes very easy not only to negate the purchases, but to change the card, get a new one sent to you very quickly, and be back online making purchases very quickly. For small business, critical to have that kind of support structure. So really, and knowing who can charge on your account and all those things. But utilizing that one card and understanding the security behind it, very, very important. So 2 things that now are kind of no-brainers, but harder. The first one is using antivirus software. There's many kinds of forms. They're very basic, all the way to very intrusive and lock out everything. It's about your comfort level. So the biggest thing to do, and one of the wrap-ups in all of this, is that really everything we do should be geared to understanding what's important to you. Again, back to being a consumer, what data, information, activity are you trying to protect? And then that's how you buy your software. That's how you set up your VPN. So if what I'm trying to protect is my personal data, then I use a software that's antivirus and really looks at the programs that are attached to my personalized data. The other thing that they'll do is they'll scan for all common software problems and software backings, do your updates to your computer. Updating computer is critical. So if you ever read the 64 pages of fine print that's associated with any app or software that you buy, what it'll tell you is if you don't update the software, they're not responsible because the software update contains security improvements to protect vulnerabilities identified by the corporation. If they didn't do that update when they find out about it, then they're liable. So if you don't do the update, you're liable. The risk is on you. So updating your computer. And it's interesting because I have family members who say, I don't do the update when it comes out because there's always a glitch in the update. Bogus response. Do the update because they are actually solving a problem on a vulnerability that's already been identified. They don't do, hey, look what we find. Let's not let anybody know about it and we'll make a fix. It's always somebody knew about it. Better make the fix because it's vulnerable in your system. So the patching they do is really not proactive. It's really about being in front of the problem. So do your patches as they come. Next thing is on the software, use something that you can understand. Why it does what it does, how it does what it does. It's really important to do that. No, I didn't get hacked. That was me with a fat finger. Next one is don't overshare on social media. So this is a challenge that we have at the university and a university. Student privacy is very important. Personal privacy is very important. But when you put your birth date out on open Facebook along with when you're leaving on vacation. This is when I see small businesses doing it all the time, advertising that they will be shut down for a week because they're on vacation. As a consumer, hey, that's really cool. You've just identified yourself as a target, because that means nobody's watching the books, the house, any of the technology stuff while you're gone. So I have to be really interesting about this when you're advertising your access and sharing information. So I saw one recently on Facebook. Very interesting dilemma. On it, the question was, hey, how many people in this user group? What was your first car? And then the second question they asked was, hey, what's your birth month? Because we're doing a study that correlates your first car and your birth month. Surprise, surprise, what are one of two of the major questions for opening a bank account for security questions? What was your first car and what's your birth dates? Now, isn't that answering? Isn't that interesting? You know, it's really strange how smart these social profilers are. I don't know if you ever saw, there was a Jimmy Fallon one night where he went out and they had an expert go out on the street and they'd say, listen, you know, most of us identify or build a password based on, you know, information that we've asked or information that's personal. The individual will sit there and talk to a person on the street for about 5 minutes. And at the end of it, they have their password because they're asking them questions that relate to the password they don't realize they're answering. Being social media, it's the same thing. They're asking you questions about yourself that is really getting to a whole lot of different things, and you can't really be sure who's on the other end of it. So I see questions, and I'm going to get to those in just a minute. Let me roll up here. So this is really my last slide, pardon me. And it's really about cybersecurity is about really being a consumer. It's about understanding what you're trying to protect and why, which is the same thing you do as a consumer. It's about being smart and making decisions. You know, it's interesting when computers first came out, and I was one of those, that the very first computer that I had, and I actually bought it in a garage in Silicon Valley. It was interesting because we were given, you know, this Excel type file. It wasn't Excel yet, but, you know, where you could list things. And the first thing I did was an inventory of all important stuff in my house. I put the list together and had all this, only to come and find out later that that's exactly the kind of target that people are looking for. They're looking for, what's the fastest way I have to get what you don't want me to have? And when you make a list of all those important things and you make it openly accessible, oh my gosh, I've just made your job easy to hack me. So really think about what you want to protect, then think about how. And the most important element, think about how you protect yourself if that information is lost or stolen. So being protective in the worst case scenario. You know, if my credit card data is stolen, what do I do? Be prepared for that. So again, as a consumer, when you go to the bank and you run out of money, you use your credit card, or you go to the ATM and pull money. So you have a backup. And as a consumer, you've taught yourself to have that backup. Cybersecurity is about really having that backup, teaching yourself to be having a backup, and really be a consumer of the internet, because it's not safe out there. Now, with that, I think I'll take on some questions. Kelly, are we okay for questions now, or where are we at?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So go to the Q&A box. We are going to take questions. Got plenty of questions for Bill. Here's your chance to get your question answered. Bill, I have a question to start.
Yeah, sure.
You talked about using online and using one card and having a strong bank behind that card. What is the best way to identify a strong bank or a stronger bank than somebody who is weaker on cybersecurity?
Okay, so one of the things I strongly recommend is if you feel you have a strong need for a cybersecurity portfolio, and Jay, it's going to kind of go to your question. Find a firm, find an advisory, a startup, a small company. Find someone who is doing that for a living. You know, I live in wine country, Paso Robles, and I've seen that a lot of the wineries are depending on the service provider for their internet connectivity for all their security. That scares the absolute snot out of me. I'll be honest. That's not, to me, the right answer. That's not to say they can't do a good job of security, but you're putting all of your eggs in one batch and you're hoping that that's all protected. And you don't really know if that's the case or not. And again, it's about being a consumer and figuring out, what do you really need to protect? And that's a conversation with someone who understands the question and can help you identify what really are the crown jewels of your home data, your personal, your work data, all those things, and then figuring out how important are they, and then how much should I spend to protect them. So this is kind of a risk trade-off analysis in cybersecurity on how much you spend to do that job to protect yourself. I strongly recommend finding not experts, but companies who work in this area and can give you advice, or you can actually reach out to the Cal Poly Cybersecurity Institute, and the Institute will help steer you with materials and other things on how to protect yourself and support there. How's that for an answer, Kelly?
That was a pretty doggone good answer.
Okay, so let's go to anonymous attendee who has an IRS problem. A, good luck. B, if you have any electronic copy of anything, use that, call the IRS. And right now, this time of year, good luck trying to get through, but you've got to talk to a person that you can say, here's my electronic filing confirmation. If you filed it yourself and you didn't have like a tax cut or one of the other entities, you're on your own to prove that that's a valid IRS submittal. So you've got some work to do that. You may end up having to give them copies of everything all over again with the filing, and they might accept that as an answer. I can't speak for the IRS. All I can tell you is the IRS is pretty unforgiving in anything except when they can be proven to be wrong. So get all your documents together and call them. So that's the best answer on that one. Facebook, another round of Ppp coming. They are always trying to improve that. Who knows what that's really doing? If you really look at it, remember, all these firms now work for Meta. And what does Meta mean? It means metadata. And Facebook is tied to Instagram, which is tied to other. So think about all that information. And again, the question becomes, even if there's protection on it, how much do I trust them to really have my best interest at heart? And how much information do I give them as such? It's always about being a consumer. Who do you want to have information about you and why? It's really interesting. I deal with some people for a living who don't want you to talk about them in any way, shape, or form. Then they post everything about themselves on Facebook to include, hey, I'm going out to party tonight. Hey, I'm going to be at this bar. All these amazing points of detail that, if you look at it, it's more personal than the kind of information that the university may have or track. So again, it's really about understanding what it means to you. Let's go to the one on the template for creating a cybersecurity plan. So this is going to sound horrible, Jay. There's a thing called the Nist, N-I-S-T framework. Very difficult to understand, whole lot of components and pieces, parts to it. Get it, read it, sit down and look at it. And then the parts that make sense to you, that's what you use. Cybersecurity is really about what makes sense to you because of what you're trying to protect. Always start with, on a cybersecurity plan, what's important to you and why should you protect it? An example, let's say I'm a small business and I have a lot of credit cards on my consumer. I must protect that information. Why? Well, because to be PCI compliant to do transactions with credit cards, there's this rating that goes along with it that if I bust that, I won't be able to do credit card transactions. So that's number one. Number two, if I lose that data associated with me, they're all coming after me. So two, branding, reputation. So it's that kind of sit down and discuss. That's how you generate and build it. Let's see, I'm trying to, Jay, if that doesn't help you, let me know. Let's see here. Jeffrey, is there a firewall that is better than another? Wow, that's a great question, because it's going to go back to your level of understanding of your network you're trying to protect. How much of a techno geek are you? Forgive, I use the word techno geek. I am one, so I get to use that word. It's a positive thing to our community. So it depends on how technical you really are and how in-depth and how much time do you have to spend on supporting that firewall. So again, it all go back to being a consumer. What do I have to protect? How important is it to me? Which then tells me how much I need to spend and how much time I need to spend supporting it. So think about that in the context. Yes, there are a bunch of firewalls. Some are better, some are bogus. We just have to really look at those that are in multi-use or built into systems are there for a reason. And let's see, Carolyn, I got hacked once and someone told me that if you open an email or visit a website and get infected with malware, but you're logged in as a basic user with no admin rights, then the malware. Okay, Carolyn, first of all, whoever told you all that made it way too hard. Let's make it simple, right? So that it helps you understand. Anytime you open a phishing attack that may have malware in it, they're in your system automatically. Several things you could do. You can get rid of the computer. Consider that a small cost on what you're doing and recreate all your accounts with all new information. You can take it to a professional who will then clean it. My warning on cleaning out a computer that's been has malware or hacked. You never really know if you got everything. So it's a risk you take. So Carolyn, it's about risk analysis. If all your personal data is in that computer and you need it back, take it, get it cleaned and get your information back, get a new computer and start over, right? It's the simplest way to guarantee you're not carrying information over from that. And you know, the answer really, Carolyn, is no one really knows how far that malware goes or what it's designed to do. So one of the problems you have with large institutions, large government agencies is the attack that you see may not be the attack that was initiated really. So that what you get to see is only a spoofing to see what you do about that attack. And the real vector is your response. And so they have second, third, fourth, fifth waves of the attack on your computer. So that what they're looking for is how you respond. So that is just, let's keep it simple now. As a consumer, if you feel like you can outsmart someone who's been sitting there 24 hours a day building something to hack your computer, well, good on you. But if you don't think you're smarter than them, start over. I know that sounds expensive, but really in the long run, it's a whole better way to go. You have a recommendation for automatic backup systems. Okay, so there's a couple philosophies on that, particularly if you're a small business. Sending information to the cloud is great. It's the best way to go if you set up the right security architecture to send it there. And this is something I've seen recently where companies offer you a secure cloud backup. Well, that means you're handing over all the security to them. That's okay if they say that if you get hacked, they'll handle all the problems that occur as a result of you getting hacked in the cloud. If you're a small business, I would back up to my own server, and I would back up every morning, midday, and afternoon. And it's just an automatic backup on site, on premise, that you have complete control over. Now, again, this means you're going to spend some extra time and extra money on that server and that backup, but you control the password, you control the access, and you can set it up so the only time it's connected to your servers when you're doing backup. So again, it's really about how much time, energy, and trust do you have in the process that you're about to put your critical information into. Let's see, I have given a lot of personal info out the last 2 years on applications for grants and loans. Haven't we all? And should watch. So one of the things I started doing is keeping a record of the information I give out and to whom, particularly if I were a business, so that you are tracking where your information and data goes and what's the name of the agency and that sort of thing. And always look for how they protect your information. And that's as best you can do, because you need the grant. You got to play by their rules. They're not going to change their rules for you, but you can either A, not do the grant, or if you do, capture how you sent, who you sent, and how they said they were going to protect that information. So again, it's really about being a consumer, and when you use your credit card, you look for the receipt. There's a reason you do that. Part of it is the protection that what you said you bought is what you got charged. Same thing with this kind of information on a grant. And let's see, I think we're down to thank you, anonymous attendee, for the thank you and the great response. Sally, let's see what you've got here. What are your thoughts on Brave? Very good. And Sally, you are an informed consumer. Good for you. My thoughts are very positive on both Brave and on DuckDuckGo. So DuckDuckGo protects you in your search. In other words, a lot of things like Google, Google actually collects what you're searching for and rates your responses. And oh, by the way, it gives you response and search factors to the companies they're working with. So there is a prioritized rate that goes along with it based on your consumer you're looking. DuckDuckGo does protect that information, so I absolutely recommend DuckDuckGo, and also Brave for a similar reason, that Brave protects the information and Brave does hourly updates on their search and server. It's amazing. You'll be sitting there, and if you look in the upper right-hand corner of Brave, it'll say update. Hit that update every time it comes up. Yeah, your search will go down. It'll come back up. It'll bring you up on the page that you're on, but it's updating your security posture. It also has a built-in ad blocker. Ad blockers are so obnoxious, right? Well, they're also leading into your acknowledgement for the potential of phishing and other things. So ad blockers are great. Sally, that's a great input. Thank you. Geez, Kelly, I've been rapid fire. Is there anything else?
Oh yeah, there's more questions. Add some emailed to me. What is the best practice for small businesses to train their employees on cybersecurity?
Great question. Okay, so you can, again, get a firm. There's a lot of training online. I would start with three things. First of all, what's important to your small firm? What's the critical, the crown jewels? Every employee in your small company needs to understand what the crown jewels are and why it's so important to protect them. Now, that doesn't mean give them the crown jewels. It means tell them what they are and why you have to protect them. I've seen lots of places where an individual had access to the crown jewels, didn't know they were important, and gave the information away. Oops, right? Can't pull it back once it's gone. So that's the first thing. Second thing for training, consider a phishing training, or at least go online. There's many vendors who sell phish training. Don't make it part of the job. Just say, listen, this is to make you smarter, not just for work, but for your personal life. So there's a program called Phish Me. There's all these different phishing training. We actually built one we use at the university that we built ourselves. It's really not as hard as it sounds. And there's many places. And DHS and others have training in this as well that they offer free. It's a government agency, government response. Go to those, look for those. Third thing I would do is talk about the difference between using your system for work and using your system for personal. The things you do in your personal life should not be on your work computer. I know a lot of times we say, hey, it's one and the same. I do them both together. You're opening the door for problems if you do that. So again, keep it simple. Talk about being a consumer, what's important, what's the crown jewels, get some phishing attack training, phishing vectors, and then most of all, really have a plan. Have your own internal plan for your organization on how to secure and protect yourself. And one of those may be, oh, by the way, unplugging everything at night. Now everybody goes, oh, all the updates are done at night. Well, guess what? Plug it in first thing in the morning, they'll still get done. But when you're unplugged from the network, nobody can break in.
Okay, one last question I have. Still got a couple minutes to get another question in. If anybody out there has a question for Bill, the question I have has to do with I use Microsoft Office email, and I want to know what are some of the best ways to use encryption emails. So I think the question is more along the lines of they use Microsoft Office. When and how should they use encrypted emails?
Oh, good question. And there's a lot of money being spent on that, let me tell you. One of the things, it goes back to a really simple principle. What are you trying to protect and why? What are the crown jewels? What's important? If there's personalized information in it, if there's a credit card number, if there's an account, or your son sends you an email and says, what's the password for Netflix? Because I'm at college and I want to use our Netflix account. That's an encrypted response, because once you send it out there unencrypted, anybody can pick it off, read it, and be using your Netflix accounts. So it's anytime you have personalized data that you don't want shared with a bazillion other people, you encrypt.
Why is it so difficult?
Why is it so difficult? Most programs are written to be very simple, conversion to hex and deconvert it back into English. The more complication you add to it, the more it costs to support, sustain, build, and sell, and the goal is to keep it cheap.
Okay. Hey, I got 2 more questions for you in the chat box.
Okay.
Can you share some examples of ransomware instances and what businesses can do to protect themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So there was a question earlier about backup. And the reason the backup, my response is so pointed is, what happens with ransomware most of the time is they come in and they find out your main operating system. So let's say it's a point of sale system and your entire business is set up on that singular point of sale. And if your point of sale goes down, what happens? You stop selling, right? You're not making money. So the ransomware would target your point of sale, and it would basically, it doesn't do anything really technically amazing. It just locks it. It does not give you access to your point of sale. All your stored data, all your credit card data, all of that is locked away. And it's not necessarily they're going to resell it, although they could. But what they're really saying is, because it's locked, you can't do business until you pay me to unlock it, and then you can run your business. And so if you're backing up your system and you have a way that your point of sale can run without that connected data, you just set up a second instance of your point of sale, you have the data you put in from your backups, and you're back online running. So you don't have to pay the ransom to do that. Another thing that we've seen is hospitals, the administration of a hospital. So the administration of hospital uses, many of them use a very similar administrative tool set. So patient data, patient information, injections, medicines, all of those are run into the same business system. The business system gets hacked with malware and basically locks it out. So when it's locked out, you can't get patient data, you can't get injections, you can't get medications, you can't get any of those things. You have no access to it. So that's why the hospital would pay a ransom. So again, most malware in that ransomware scenario has locked you out. Now, many of them are also, while you're locked out, they're dissecting your data. They're looking for the credit card numbers and other things. And then they come back and say, well, we're going to sell that data if they break it. That's a secondary effect. The primary effect is to lock you out, to pay them to release your data to you.
Fascinating. Well, fantastic stuff, Bill. Great to have you here this week. We're out of time.
Wow.
Thanks a lot. We'll be back next week. Next week's Small Business Week. We're going to do some type of celebration with webinar number 112. So Bill, thanks again. Fantastic information. Great to have you on. And so for Bill Britton, I'm Kelly Bearden. We'll be back next week. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jeff and Kelly and everybody else out there. And thank you, Maureen and everybody.
Next week, people. 112. Bye-bye.